Hello, I promised I'd do a review of Rings of Power Season 1, Episode 7. And this is a few days after its release. It's given me time to listen to a lot of other people's comments and to think about the episode. But I wasn't right out of the gate with the review. I've heard people say this was the worst episode ever, and they tend to say each episode is worse than the one before. I heard somebody else say they thought this was the second best episode. If this was the second best episode, I'm not sure what the best episode was. Actually, I would rate it in comparison with the first six. Perhaps in some ways, this was the best of the seven. Not that it's a great episode. It's closer to a mediocre episode. Not what you'd expect to see from a $1 billion TV program. But I made some notes along the way as I watched the episode, and I'll run through my notes and add some other comments. Okay, we start out this episode, as you may remember if you watched it, and if you didn't watch it, there are spoilers here. Mount Doom has erupted, and everything was covered in ash. There was a pyroclastic flow. The end of the previous episode, Galadriel stood there watching this flow of super hot ash and gas coming right towards her, and just closed her eyes. Okay, we knew she couldn't die. She has to stay to the end of the series. We also know that Elendil cannot die because he has to be in the last battle. We know Isildur can't die because he's going to be in the last battle, or battle at the end. Like none of the really important characters can die. They could, I suppose, conceivably do away with the Queen Regent. Or they could do away with one of the Durins, but basically the characters we're supposed to care about the most, they're not going to die, which takes away a lot of the tension and excitement. Someone compared this to Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, where the writer and the showrunners really made you believe that any character was expendable. In fact, with Game of Thrones, it got so bad that you started to be convinced that any character that you grew to like, for sure they were going to die. So here we have the opposite problem, that if you manage to care about any of these main characters, they're not going to die. So, and you also, if you know anything about the story, you kind of know the basic outline of what has to happen. So it takes a lot of the suspense out of it, but they could have done a lot more to work around those problems. So anyhow, back to the beginning. Galadriel picks herself up, dusts herself off. It's covered with ash. She looks around. There are people's dead bodies all over the place. Her hair isn't even singed. I mean, I looked as closely as I could. Not a singe on her hair. So we'd seen absolutely no magical abilities from Galadriel so far, but apparently she has at least one magical ability: the ability to put an invisible fireproof shield around her when necessary. Who knew? But it was totally transparent. So, of course, that doesn't really explain it either, because Elendil lives, and then you're made to think that Isildur is dead when a burning roof fell on top of him. But he can't be dead because he has to be there at the end. So it's just that his dad and the other Numenorians that escape from Mordor think that he's dead because they couldn't find him, but they didn't look very hard. So weak. Yeah, and then Galadriel and Theo, somehow they're wandering off by themselves. Why didn't they join all the other survivors that were retreating? Well, because we want the story to have some bonding time between the two of them. And we're also going to recreate a scene from Fellowship of the Ring when the hobbits were hiding from the Dark Riders. We have the same thing all over again with Galadriel and Theo hiding under a fallen tree while the orcs are right above, not only looking, but sniffing, just like those Dark Riders did. Over and over again, not just in this episode, but in all 7 episodes, you see a lot of scenes that are that clearly have scenes from Peter Jackson's films in mind or from the story, and they're just reenacting them with different characters. Another one, not quite so obvious, but when we go back to the Harfoots and they're crossing a little stream and one of them drops a basket, and then we switch to the 3 creepy cultists, and one of the creepy cultists picks up the basket and looks at it. Seeing the Harfoots in the water and dropping something, I could not help but think about Smeagol and his friend fighting over the One Ring of Power as the background story for how Sauron's ring gets found, because it had been lost in the water. To me, that was another clear reference. And there's a lot of these. I can't think of, there's the Ent reference where the Harfoots are talking. They're talking about Meteor Man, the wizard. He's talking to the tree. Trees can't talk. Some do. Can't help but think about Ents. Apparently the Harfoots have run into Ents sometimes. So over and over again, you see this homage to Jackson's films and to Tolkien's story, but then in other places they totally butcher the storyline. Okay, so there's an awful lot of time of people just wandering around through this burnt landscape. It's about as exciting as watching paint dry. And here's something else that it's shared with all the other 6 episodes. The dialogue is so slow when people go to say things. I mean, slower than my dialogue. Somebody says something, and then there's, a 20-second pause or something before the other person responds. And then in between sentences, there are these long gaps. It's like the showrunners, aka the script writers and executive directors, I didn't have enough to write, and they couldn't think of enough interesting things to say. So to stretch it out and make it fill a whole season, they just have everybody talk slower and use all these long gaps. It doesn't produce dramatic tension. It's producing boredom in the audience. Speaking of the dialogue, there were efforts, I think maybe more in this episode than any of the previous 6, efforts to have people say meaningful things. You can see people struggling, several characters struggling with, did I do the wrong thing back in this previous episode? Did I just help to create a disaster instead of solving a problem? And also wondering about fate. Why did these terrible things happen? How can this be? Why must I suffer this way? So an attempt at self-reflection, an attempt at addressing philosophical questions. Most of them, I'd say 2/3 of them or 3/4 of them kind of fall flat for one reason or another. Because it was written in a clunky way. The writing just missed the target, although you can see what they were going for. Or B, the character has acted so totally opposite to what they're saying now, maybe in just the previous episode, that you're thinking, how can they come up with this when, just a little bit ago we saw them act entire. An example here is Galadriel when Theo says he wants to kill the orcs and take back his homeland, and asks Galadriel, "How many orcs have you killed?" And Galadriel says something like, it's not a good thing to be happy about killing somebody, even orcs, because it produces the same darkness in yourself that you see in them. Oh, well, what about the previous episode where she was threatening Adar that she personally was going to eradicate every other orc on the continent and save him for last so that she could inform him she'd killed his whole species and then kill him? So she went from genocidal maniac to I don't know, Zen philosophical sage here and talking, and it comes off as unbelievable because the way that she was acting just a short time ago. So anyhow, attempts at being philosophical, attempts at character self-reflection. A lot of it fell flat, but some of it worked. I got to give them credit for slightly better lines than what they've had in the previous episodes. All right. We switch over back to Elrond trying to, and Durin Jr. Is going to be Durin the Fourth, trying to convince Dad, Durin the Third, the king, currently the king in Khazad-dûm, to mine the mithril so they can save the elves. And oh my God, in the previous episode, when Gil-galad was saying that without the mithril we're going to die, I thought this was sort of metaphorical, like they needed the mithril to make magical weapons that could defeat Sauron and other powerful creatures. No, they meant it. Yeah, they meant it like magical health boosts in a video game. Apparently, I don't know. Are they supposed to grind it up and drink it in a milkshake or what? I mean, they mean it totally literally, which is so far from Tolkien's vision. The magic always has a mysterious quality about it. It's not just that, oh, let's eat some mithril or something and that will save us. Anyhow, Durin Sr. is having none of it. He has a sense, and he doesn't explain why, again, in the dialogue, but you can tell he has a sense that there's something dangerous about mining that mithril. Of course, we know if you read the book, that they're going to awake a Balrog, and in fact, we see a Balrog near the end of the show. But the dwarves don't know that for sure. It's just that Durin says, "Why should I put my people at risk and give you elves the most valuable thing we've ever discovered here?" Oh, Elrond says, "Well, we'll give you 500 years worth of food and timber and stuff in return." Oh, great. You're going to give me common trade goods, the promise of a 500-year contract when I don't even know if you guys will stay here that long. In return, we give you the most valuable discovery we've ever made. No, not going to have it. So this leads to what I thought was one of the two best scenes in episode 7, and that is big argument between the Durin Sr. and Durin Jr. over the mining of the mithril and the helping the elves. I won't say anything more about it in case you haven't watched the episode. I actually felt emotionally engaged in both sides of this argument. That was some of the best writing in this episode or in this season, as far as I was concerned. The other one, when we switch back to the Numenorians and Halbrand and so on, when we switch back to the Numenorians and they're going to go back to their island, but the Queen Regent, when sparks flew into her eyes from the eruption of Mount Doom and from the burning building or whatnot, they must have burned her cornea of her eyes. Now she can't see. And I think she was asked, so are you just going to give up now and go home? And she basically says, the hell we're giving up. We're coming back and we're going to get these guys. Most decisive that we've seen the Queen Regent yet. Before, it appeared like her sympathies kind of ran with her dad, and that is that the people of the Numenor should maintain a close alliance with the elves. But a lot of maybe half the population were against that. They were resentful of the elves because the elves had immortality, and why couldn't they have immortality? Because they had helped the elves defeat the prior bad boss. So it seemed like she was kind of on the middle of the fence. She was reluctant to get involved in Galadriel's mission of going to Middle Earth and finding out what these orcs are up to. But now, no, she's totally committed. She says, we're going to do this. I don't care what people say. This will not stand. This evil will not stand. We're going to come back and fight. So that was nice too. I thought that was the second best dialogue in the episode, I felt, or monologue, whatever. Let's see. Galadriel talks with Theo, and they're bonding and reminiscing about meeting her husband, Celeborn. And she talks about she's dancing in a field and he sees her. Look, this was not the story of Galadriel and Celeborn. I guess this can only appeal to people that never read the book. This was the story of Beren and Luthien. And they just lifted it and transferred it totally wrong to Galadriel and Celeborn. Furthermore, she says he's dead. She said the last she saw him, he was heading off to battle, and his armor didn't fit him, and she told him he looked like a silver clam or something like that. And then he never came back from the battle, so she assumes he's dead. Well, we know he can't be dead either, so he'll probably turn up later in season 2, or if they make any more seasons after 2, maybe he'll show up after that, but he can't be dead. But I guess this is just to make Galadriel look like an even stronger female character because she's fighting evil all on her own. She's not attached to any weak man holding her back. No, independent woman. Meteor Man and the Harfoots. Yeah, let's go back to them. So the Harfoots, they're suspicious of big people. You know, big people could be very bad to them. But you know, they're wandering around constantly. They never stay in one place very long. They're wandering around through a dangerous world. It's not just men. They might encounter orcs. Those huge wolves. I mean, so many dangers. And they're pulling their little wooden carts with grass and vines and stuff on top, supposedly to disguise them. Although when they're moving, which half the time they seem to be, wouldn't you be suspicious of a moving hummock? That wouldn't look quite right, right? I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. Their camouflage is ridiculous, but okay, it's cute. I guess if this is a family story and you got a 10-year-old watching, they're supposed to like the Harfoots. The Harfoots are cute. Anyhow, not only are they suspicious of all the bigger creatures, people, um, they're they think Gandalf must be evil. So they come to this grove where they expect to pick apples. Oh, a bolide, a flaming rock from the explosion of Mount Doom landed here and it killed all the apple trees. So they just got a bunch of burned apples and burned trees. And then I think it was Nori uh, says, "Well, maybe Meteor Man, maybe this stranger can help because he does have magic abilities. We saw that already." And he's very perturbed, and so you see him put his hands on the tree and start chanting in I assume that's Kenya, the Elvish language, telling the tree to come back to life. And yeah, it looks like it's starting to come back to life. But then Snorri's sister runs right underneath the tree, and one branch falls on her, and now all the Harfoots think, "Oh my God, he's killing our kids." And so they tell him, "Look, you need to go somewhere else. There's some men like your size over that way. Why don't you go over there?" And Nori gives him an apple. That should sustain him on his months long journey to find somebody that can tell him more than the Harfoots can. And then the day after he leaves, because the kid was stupid enough to stand right underneath a tree that he's trying to bring to life. Day afterwards, they come out and all the trees magically have come back to normal and all the fruit is edible again. And they all attribute it to the stranger, the meteor man. He was good. He did good magic. Nori, you were right all along. Well, if they're so suspicious, why didn't they say, you see, as soon as we got rid of him, things came back to life again. He was the problem. I mean, the way they've set the Harfoots up, it would have been equally likely that they would say that. But no, now they're all convinced that not only does he have great powers, but he's good. And let's go find him. At least a few of the Harfoots go off in search of Meteor Man. I said before, I hoped he wasn't Gandalf. I didn't think he quite fit Gandalf. I heard somebody say, "Well, maybe he's Radagast." No, I really don't think he's Radagast. I think they're making him Gandalf. I don't know if they'll ever say so, but I think this is Gandalf just after his arrival on Middle Earth, when he hasn't quite figured out or remembered uh, what he's doing yet. So, as if they weren't weak enough without even pointy sticks to defend themselves against huge wolves and everything. Now we're just going to have four of them take off with not one pointy stick among them to go find Meteor Man. I said all along, Meteor Man was going to be good. He was going to be a wizard and he was going to be good. Then we run into creepy cultists, the three of them, they're female. And I didn't mention this before. When you look at them, the way they're dressed, the way they look, the way they're filmed, the lighting around them and everything, they look more like elves than any of the elves look like elves. Other than their ears not being pointy, they look like you'd expect an elf to be dressed if they're not wandering around the wilderness, if they were, in their hometown or something. Who are they? People speculated before that maybe one of them was Sauron in his beautiful form. And since Sauron could shift his appearance to just about anything, he could certainly appear as a female too. But the fact that there's the three of them, you got to think they must be all equals somehow. Well, they showed probably one of the two strongest magics yet. Pseudo Gandalf healed the grove, but creepy cultists, first of all, extinguished the one Harfoot's torch by just grabbing the flames with her hands and just sucking all the flame power into her, and then blowing on it, and she incinerates all their carts. Okay, she totally destroyed everything that they had. I guess no more maps to consult for you, Harfoot leader, whose name I don't remember. You guys just lost everything. So I'm not sure who they're supposed to represent. You know, it could have worked to have the one of them be Sauron, the one with the short blondish hair, the one that looks the most evil of the three, but she's probably not. They do have some actor, I guess a new actor they're gonna trot out in season 2 that's gonna be good looking Sauron. And he's gotta convince Celeborn to or Celebrimbor to show him the elvish secrets of crafting magic rings, so that Sauron, who's already a pretty good craftsman, can then forge his one ring in secret over at Mount Doom. So I don't know that it's any of the characters that we've seen. I don't know why everyone was so convinced that Halbrand was going to become Sauron. If Halbrand is Sauron, I will eat my hat. You know, the one that I don't have. So it's a pretty easy wager, but I'm going to say no. The show keeps proving everybody wrong, but I'm going to say I don't see it being Halbrand. We'll see. Looks like he may be headed that way along with Galadriel, which is another weak point in the story. Halbrand got this big wound in his side during the eruption and everything, and he's lying there in bed. He looks like he's on his deathbed, and they said, yeah, the wound has well, basically it's gone gangrenous. Okay. So Galadriel announces profoundly he needs elven magic. In other words, he's beyond anything you healers can do for him. We've got to get him to a powerful elf healer. Oh, on the other side of the continent. So the next thing you know, up off his deathbed, he mounts his horse and he's ready to ride. He's ready to ride 1,000 miles or something. Probably to Linden, basically. So, if it's on his deathbed, how could he do that? You know, it's just these very simple flaws in reasoning, like how the pyroclastic cloud can engulf everybody, and yet Galadriel doesn't have a singed hair on her head. Just little things like that make it cheap. But creepy cultists, I like them. For creepy cultists, they're good. Harfoots announce, we stay true to each other. I call BS on that. I mean, they wanted to leave the Brandyfoots behind. First of all, because they had Meteor Man with them and they didn't trust him, and then because the father sprained his ankle. Oh well, let him stay behind and die. We're not going to wait for them. And then the leader's wife even suggests, let's take the wheels off their cart to make sure they can't follow us. They don't stick together at all. They're always going around with the little garlands in their hairs and singing and smiling, and they're ruthless. They don't even protect their own. Speaking of which, we had more Harfoot singing. Can they please stop singing? It was okay that one long song in a previous episode just the one solo girl's voice singing about how they're traveling. That was okay. It was like being in a musical. But boy, they were singing again this episode, and I've had enough with the Harfoot singing. Stop. Uh, Khazad Doom in this episode with the arguing over whether or not they're going to mine mithril. It's looking smaller and smaller and smaller and shabbier and shabbier and shabbier. Same problem they had with Numenor, which ended up looking like one medium-sized fishing village or something with a bunch of just common folk instead of the greatest kingdom of man that the world had ever known. Everything looks small and cheap, which goes back to the question, where's the money going? Anyhow, and just almost at the end of the episode, we see a Balrog. Why? Because, well, this one little leaf from the tree that got healed by the Mithril's magical powers. One little leaf fell down on an air draft, I guess, fell down this shaft and landed like 50 feet away from the Balrog. And that woke him up. He's been asleep for thousands of years, and a little leaf woke him up. Not like any pebbles ever would have fallen down there or anything, but nice visual, nice visual. So makes you wonder how much damage is the Balrog going to do in the final episode of the season. Is he going to start munching on dwarves or something? Because they'll probably start mining mithril. My guess is they'll be mining mithril next show. Final episode of the season. They got to leave a cliffhanger somehow, or several cliffhangers. So one of the cliffhangers for the end of the season might be Balrog fully awakening and all the dwarves realizing what they've got underneath their feet. So, in summary, this is a series that is way, way below its potential. And just like a person once said, it takes a village to raise a healthy child. You know, it takes a village to make a disaster this big. Most of the blame goes to the showrunners, aka screenwriters, who never should have been put in charge of this project. But then you have to ask, who put them in charge? How many executives at Amazon passed, said okay on that idea? And how many of them approved every episode? And why have they started production of season 2 when what they should be doing is they should fire the show writers? They should bring back the 3 Tolkien experts that they hired and then let go, 2 of them being artists that can do fantastic scenes from Tolkien's world, the third one being an expert on all of Tolkien's lore to try to make the story a little more consistent with the history. Bring them back, bring in a really good director, bring in a really good cinematographer. I mean, basically, you're stuck with the actors that you introduced us to, and we're going to be stuck with our memories of all their inconsistent actions and their clunky lines from season 1. But if you just threw out everything that you have right now for season 2 and wrote a season 2 that was worthy of this endeavor, maybe they could gain some audience back. I know it's increasingly hard the more you turn potential viewers off to bring them back. But I mean, basically, as far as I'm concerned, Amazon had 2 options here based on what they've got so far. They could have just canceled it after season one, even though I know they had contracted for a season two, and so they would lose what money they had already committed, but they would stop the hemorrhaging. That was just recognize that this was a failure and stop. Or the other, and what I think better option is what I just said. Fire everybody that was working on this, throw out the script, burn it, and spread the ashes in the ocean. And then bring in talented people and create a new season two. They chose option three. Let's go ahead right now with what we got, even though the audience ratings for season one were dismal. You know, tomorrow's another day, I guess. But they say that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. Uh, yeah, who knew? This is going to go down ranked right up there with John Carter of Mars, probably surpassing it, at least right equal to it, as one of the most disastrous decisions in the history of American visual arts. I'm sorry to say, but like I've said before, it's kind of like watching a train wreck. It's horrible, and you can't take your eyes off it. See you next time.